They say trust is the foundation of every marriage. A quaint, comforting sentiment, the kind of thing you see embroidered on a throw pillow. For years, I believed it. Our foundation, Mary's and mine, was granite, I thought. Rock solid, impermeable, built to withstand the erosion of time. Mary wasn't just my wife. She was the co-architect of my life, my partner in every conceivable sense of the word. Her laughter was the light that filled the rooms of our home, her support the scaffolding that held me up. Or so I believed. The first crack was almost invisible, a hairline fracture in the perfect facade of an ordinary Tuesday. She was on her phone, her fingers a frantic blur across the screen, a staccato rhythm of urgency that felt out of place in the quiet of our living room. "Who's that?" I asked, my voice a casual, unbothered thing. She looked up, a startled, wide-eyed look, the kind a child gives when caught with their hand in the cookie jar. "Oh, just work," she said, flashing a smile. But it wasn't her smile. It was a replica, a well-made but ultimately hollow imitation. The light didn't reach her eyes. I didn't press. I nodded, a simple, accepting gesture that was a lie in itself. But the seed of doubt, a tiny, insidious thing, had been planted. And that seed, once planted in the fertile soil of a dawning suspicion, sprouted with an alarming, invasive speed. The little things, the benign anomalies of a shared life, began to stand out in stark, unsettling relief. Her workdays began to stretch, bleeding into the evenings with a new and relentless frequency. Weekends, once our sanctuary, were now filled with a sudden, urgent need for errands that took hours to complete. And the perfume. God, the perfume. Mary had always been a woman of subtle elegance. I tried to rationalize it. A phase. A midlife recalibration of her own self-image. Who was I to judge a woman's desire to feel good about herself? I became her willing accomplice in the construction of a new, unsettling narrative. Then there was the night she came home, the moon already high in the sky. I had made dinner, her favorite chicken Alfredo, a peace offering to the growing distance between us. She walked in, her face flushed, her lips slightly swollen, a look of radiant, sated exhaustion. She smiled weakly. "I'm not hungry. Long day." A long day at the office, a battle with spreadsheets and deadlines, does not leave a woman looking like she's just stepped out of a Renaissance painting. I know what you're thinking. Why didn't you confront her? Why didn't you demand the truth? Trust me, the words were a physical pressure in my throat, a scream I had to swallow. But there is a chasm between suspicion and certainty, and I was not yet ready to leap. Besides, I have always believed that the truest version of a person is revealed not when they are under interrogation, but when they believe no one is watching. So, I began to watch. Not with the frantic paranoia of a jealous husband, but with the quiet, dispassionate observation of a scientist studying a strange new phenomenon. I didn't snoop. I just paid attention. And attention, I discovered, is a harsh and unforgiving light. It led me to the receipt. I found it while cleaning, a crumpled piece of evidence tucked carelessly between the cushions of the couch. An upscale restaurant downtown. Dinner for two. The date was from a night she had claimed to be working late. I flipped it over, hoping for some innocent explanation, a scribbled note, anything. It was blank. Still, I said nothing. I folded it, tucked it into my wallet, a cold, hard piece of the truth I was slowly, painfully assembling. The final, irrevocable piece of evidence arrived on a quiet Friday night. Her phone buzzed on the coffee table, a notification lighting up the screen. She was in the shower. I glanced over. A single line of text. "Can't wait to see you again. No name. Just a number." My stomach twisted. The air in the room grew thin, and for a moment, I thought I might be sick. But I did not touch the phone. I did not storm into the bathroom and demand to know the identity of her correspondent. Instead, I did something that most would not understand. I smiled. A cold, quiet, and deeply unsettling smile. Because while betrayal is a wound that cuts to the bone, there is a strange, terrible power in possessing the truth before your enemy knows you have it. She thought she was so clever, spinning her web of deceit in the very house we had built together. But the thing about webs is that they are fragile. The more you expand them, the more tension you place on the anchor points, the easier they are to break. I just had to wait. I just had to let her spin a little more. Trust, they say, is the foundation. But once that foundation is gone, it is not just cracked, it is rubble. And Mary, my beautiful, brilliant, treacherous Mary, was about to discover that I am a master builder. Suspicion is a slow poison, a low-grade fever that saps your strength over time. Certainty is a bullet to the heart. The night I followed Mary was the night the bullet found its mark. It was a Tuesday, a bitter, ironic bookend to the day my doubts had first taken root. She left the house with a hurried, almost giddy energy, dressed in a silk blouse she normally reserved for our anniversary dinners. The perfume was a cloud around her, a declaration of intent. An important client meeting, she'd said, the line now so familiar it was almost comfortable. I wasn't planning on following her. The idea was repugnant, a descent into a kind of madness I had always disdained. But as I sat in the echoing silence of our home, the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall, a mocking metronome marking the time she was away from me, something inside me snapped. It was a quiet, clean break with the man I used to be. The man who gave the benefit of the doubt. Her car wasn't at her office. Of course it wasn't. At that moment, I had a choice. Go home, pour a drink, and continue to live in the gray, murky twilight of my own denial. Or drive into the darkness and face the truth, whatever it might be. I kept driving. The week before, in a moment of cold, pragmatic clarity that now seemed like a prophecy, I had discreetly installed a GPS tracker in her car. A small, ugly act that felt like a betrayal in itself, but a necessary one. I checked the app. Her location pinged at the Cypress, a boutique hotel on the other side of town, a place known for its discretion and its ridiculously expensive cocktails. A place for assignations, not for meetings. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles ached. Still, I breathed. There is a strange, crystalline clarity that comes with profound heartbreak. The chaotic static of emotion recedes, and all that is left is a singular, cold focus. The question is no longer why. The question is what next. I parked across the street from the hotel, killed the engine, and waited. I would not be the enraged husband, storming into the lobby, making a scene. That was a performance for a different kind of play. I was a collector of evidence, a gatherer of facts. I didn't have to wait long. 10 minutes later, she emerged from the lobby, her face alight with a smile that was both familiar and utterly alien. She was not alone. He was tall, dressed in a sharp suit, with a smug, self-satisfied smile that seemed to be his default setting. His hand was on the small of her back, a gesture of casual, confident ownership. He guided her toward his car, a low-slung, aggressive-looking sports car that was the antithesis of everything I was. She laughed at something he said, a genuine, unrestrained peal of joy that used to be reserved for me. That was the cut that went the deepest. This wasn't a reluctant, guilt-ridden transgression. She was happy. I could have confronted them then. I could have laid on the horn, rolled down the window, and screamed her name. I could have watched the joy curdle on her face, watched his smug confidence dissolve into panicked confusion. But I didn't. Instead, I raised my phone, the camera a cold, impartial eye, and I took a picture. Proof. They drove off. I followed, keeping a safe, anonymous distance. They ended up at the same downtown restaurant from the receipt, a place that was now a monument to my own foolishness. For 2 hours, I sat in the darkness of my car, a ghost at their feast, and watched. I watched them sip wine. I watched them lean in close, their heads almost touching, sharing secrets I would never know. I watched as he reached across the table and took her hand. She did not pull away. You would think I would feel rage, a white-hot, volcanic fury. But I didn't. What I felt was a profound and chilling detachment. It was like watching a film about someone else's life falling apart. The woman in that window, the laughing, vibrant, adulterous woman, was not my Mary. She was a stranger who happened to be wearing my wife's face. When they finally left, I did not follow. I had what I needed. I drove home, parked in the driveway, and sat in the darkness, the engine ticking as it cooled. The house looked different, colder, its warm, inviting lights now seeming like a cruel deception. I thought about the years, the shared dreams, the life we had built, and it all felt like a story I had read in a book, a fiction with a sad, inevitable ending. Mary came home near midnight, slipping into the house with a practiced quietness, assuming I was asleep. I heard the soft click of her heels on the hardwood, the rustle of her dress as she moved toward the bedroom. I could have confronted her then, in the darkness, the evidence of her betrayal still fresh. But confrontation is a card you only play once. And when I played mine, it would not just be to win the hand. It would be to burn the whole damn table down. So I waited. I lay there, beside the warm, sleeping body of a stranger, and I stared at the ceiling, making a new set of vows to myself. I would not let this destroy me. Whatever came next, I would face it on my own terms. They thought they were in control. They had no idea the game had just begun. It's one thing to have the knowledge of a betrayal locked away in the safe of your own mind. It's another thing entirely when the betrayal shows up on your doorstep, bold and uninvited. 3 days after my silent, soul-crushing vigil outside that restaurant, he came to me. Mary was out, another errand, another meeting. The lies had become a monotonous, ambient noise in our life. I was at home, trying to lose myself in the mindless distraction of a football game when the doorbell rang. I expected a package, a neighbor, anyone but him. He stood on my porch, a portrait of smug, tailored arrogance. The same perfectly styled hair, the same suit that probably cost more than my first car, the same condescending grin that I now saw in my nightmares. He did not look nervous. He looked pleased, like a predator who had finally cornered his prey and was taking a moment to savor the kill. I opened the door, my expression a carefully constructed blank slate. "Can I help you?" "You must be Michael," he said, his voice a smooth, oily thing. He didn't offer his name. He didn't need to. "I'm Andrew. I think it's time we had a talk." Andrew. So the ghost now had a name. His arrogance, momentarily checked, reasserted itself. He stepped into my home, his eyes doing a slow, appraising sweep of the living room, lingering on the framed photos of Mary and me that lined the mantelpiece. I wondered, in that moment, if he felt a single shred of guilt. I doubted it. Men like him saw lives not as things to be respected, but as things to be conquered. I led him into the living room and gestured to the armchair opposite the one I usually sat in. "Sit," I said. He started toward the chair, but I spoke again, my voice a casual, conversational tone that was utterly at odds with the violence coiling in my gut. "You know," I said, "not all battles are fought with words, Andrew." He froze, his hand hovering over the back of the chair, his eyes narrowing. "What's that supposed to mean?" I stood up slowly, my smile never wavering. "It means you walked into the wrong house." And then I hit him. It was not a wild, telegraphed punch born of rage. It was a short, sharp, perfectly timed strike, a carpenter's blow, designed for maximum impact and precision. It caught him on the jaw and sent him stumbling backward, his smug grin dissolving into a mask of pure, unadulterated shock. He crashed into the coffee table, a cascade of magazines and coasters scattering across the floor. He scrambled to his feet, his eyes wide with a mixture of pain and disbelief. But I was faster. I was on him before he could regain his balance, a controlled explosion of contained fury. I didn't want to beat him senseless. That would be too easy, too primitive. I wanted to dismantle him, to systematically strip him of his arrogance, to teach him a lesson in a language he could not possibly misunderstand. A shove, a twist of his arm, the cold, hard reality of the floor meeting his face. "Michael, wait," he stammered, holding up a hand, his voice a pathetic, gurgling thing. "We can talk about this." "We were talking," I said, my voice a low, cold growl as I stood over him. "Now we're not." I left him on the floor, groaning, clutching his ribs, his expensive suit now a ruined mess. I walked to the kitchen, my hand steady, and dialed for an ambulance. Not out of compassion, but out of a cold, pragmatic need to remove him from my home. When the paramedics arrived, my story was simple. My friend Andrew here had a little too much to drink. Slipped and fell. Andrew, to his credit, was smart enough not to contradict me. He knew, lying there on my floor, that this could have been much, much worse. As they loaded him onto the stretcher, his eyes, now wide with a dawning, primal fear, met mine. I leaned in close, my voice a whisper for his ears only. "Stay away from my house," I said. "Stay away from my wife. You have already lost this game, Andrew. You just don't know it yet." When Mary came home that night, she said nothing about Andrew, and neither did I. She moved through the house with a quiet, nervous energy, oblivious to the fact that the war had just escalated, that blood, however minor, had been spilled on our living room floor. She thought her world was precarious. She had no idea it was about to be utterly and completely demolished. I was no longer just the betrayed husband. I was something else entirely. And the game of chess had just begun. The aftermath of Andrew's unceremonious, stretcher-bound exit from my home left a strange and unsettling quiet in its wake. I knew it was a temporary ceasefire, not a surrender. Men like him, men whose entire identities were built on a scaffolding of ego, do not retreat gracefully. They regroup, they re-strategize, and they retaliate. I needed a plan that was not just defensive, but preemptive. I needed to dismantle his entire operation before he had a chance to launch his next offensive. My first call was to my lawyer. Greg was an old college friend, a man whose mind was as sharp and unforgiving as a shard of glass. I laid out the entire, sordid story, the affair, the evidence, the confrontation. He listened without interruption, his silence a comforting presence. "You've got the evidence, right?" he asked when I was finished, his tone all business. "I have a dossier," I said. Greg's advice was brutal and brilliant. We would build a financial fortress. He began the process of legally separating my personal assets from our marital ones, moving funds, restructuring holdings, creating a firewall that would be impenetrable when the divorce proceedings began. This wasn't just about protecting my wealth. It was about seizing control of the board. While Greg handled the legal machinery, I began the quieter, more insidious work of intelligence gathering. I needed allies. And the most valuable allies are often the ones who don't know they're on your side. Mary's best friend, Diane, was my first target. I met her for lunch, playing the part of the confused, heartbroken husband. "I just don't know what's going on with her, Diane," I said, my voice a carefully constructed mixture of sadness and frustration. "She seems so distant." Diane, who had always been more loyal to Mary than to the truth, was a vault of guarded pleasantries. But I could see the conflict in her eyes. She knew something was wrong. "I'm sure it's just a phase, Michael," she said, the words a hollow reassurance. I didn't press. I had planted a seed. I had positioned myself not as an accuser, but as a concerned partner, making her an unwitting double agent. Any information she gleaned from Mary, any hint of their plans, would now be filtered through the lens of my feigned vulnerability. Meanwhile, I kept tabs on Andrew. A discreet inquiry at the hospital confirmed he had been treated for minor contusions and a bruised ego, then released. As I suspected, he filed no police report. To do so would be to invite questions he was not prepared to answer. He was a creature of the shadows, and the harsh light of a formal investigation was his greatest fear. But my most important move was a subtle shift in the emotional landscape of my own home. I stopped being the distant, brooding husband. I began to leave small, poignant reminders of the life we had built scattered around the house. A photo album from our trip to Italy left open on the coffee table. The song we had danced to at our wedding playing softly on the stereo when she came home. I was not trying to win her back. I was trying to haunt her with the ghost of what she had thrown away. I wanted her to stew in her own guilt, to have her own loyalty to Andrew tested not by my anger, but by the weight of her own memories. At the end of the week, I had fortified my financial position, planted a seed of doubt with Mary's closest confidant, and begun a campaign of psychological warfare against my own wife. Andrew and Mary thought they were the players, moving their pieces across the board in a simple game of romantic conquest. They had no idea that I was the one who owned the board, and I was slowly, patiently, removing all of their squares. There is a particular kind of quiet that precedes a storm, a heavy, charged stillness where the world seems to hold its breath. That was the atmosphere in our house. Mary was a ghost, drifting through rooms, her guilt a palpable presence. I was a silent observer, a chess master contemplating his final moves. The night Andrew came back, the storm finally broke. He didn't ring the doorbell this time. I heard his car on the gravel driveway, the engine a low, aggressive growl. I was in my workshop, the scent of sawdust a familiar comfort, when I saw the headlights slice through the darkness. Mary was out. "A girl's night," she'd claimed. My tracking app, a tool I now used with a grim, dispassionate regularity, showed her car parked in the vicinity of Andrew's downtown apartment. The irony was almost poetic. I was not surprised to find him on my porch. He looked different. The smug, polished arrogance was gone, replaced by a raw, jagged anger. His jaw was still discolored from our last encounter, a faint, ugly bruise that he wore like a badge of dishonor. "Michael," he said, his voice a low growl. "We need to finish this." I didn't react. I simply stood in the doorway, a silent, immovable object. "Come in, Andrew," I said, my voice calm, almost welcoming. He hesitated, a flicker of confusion in his eyes. He had expected a fight on the porch, a shouting match. My quiet invitation was not part of his script. He stepped inside, and as the door clicked shut behind him, I could see him recalibrating, his predator's mind trying to regain the upper hand. "You're surprisingly polite for a man who's about to lose everything," he sneered, his bravado returning. "Lost," I repeated, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touching my lips. I leaned against the wall, my arms crossed. "Explain." He didn't sit. He paced, a caged animal, his movements jerky and aggressive. "You've lost her, Michael. She's with me. The sooner you accept that, the easier this will be." I watched him, my expression one of mild, clinical curiosity. "You really believe that, don't you?" "It's not a belief. It's a fact," he spat. "Mary and I are together. You're out of the picture. Deal with it." And there it was. The same pathetic, rehearsed line. The declaration of a victory he had not earned. I chuckled, a soft, dry sound. "All right, Andrew," I said, pushing off the wall. "Let's deal with it." I walked toward him, my movements slow and deliberate. His smirk faltered. He held his ground, but I could see the tension in his shoulders, the slight widening of his eyes. "Here's the thing," I said, my voice dropping to a low, conversational tone. "Not all battles end with a declaration of victory." "What are you talking about?" he asked, his brow furrowing. I didn't answer. In one swift, fluid motion, I closed the distance between us. My fist connected with his jaw, the same spot as before, a brutal, satisfying encore. The look of shock on his face was a thing of beauty. He stumbled back, crashing into a small end table, a lamp shattering on the floor. Before he could recover, I was on him. I grabbed the collar of his expensive shirt, the fabric tearing in my grip, and slammed him against the wall. The framed photos of our life, of Mary and me, rattled, one crashing to the floor. "You think you can walk into my house and dictate the terms of my life?" I growled, my face inches from his. "You think you can take what is mine and walk away unscathed?" He struggled, a pathetic, flailing attempt at resistance. "Michael, wait." "No." I cut him off, slamming him against the wall again for emphasis. "You don't get to talk. You've said enough." This was not about a wild, uncontrolled rage. This was a controlled demolition. I wasn't trying to kill him. I was trying to deconstruct him, to strip him of his arrogance, to leave him with nothing but the raw, terrifying knowledge that he had picked a fight with the wrong man. A few more well-placed blows, and he was a crumpled, groaning heap on my floor. I stood over him, my breathing heavy but steady. I pulled out my phone. "Emergency services," I said into the receiver, my eyes never leaving his. "I have an intruder who has had an accident. He'll need a stretcher." When the paramedics arrived, Andrew was too dazed and too terrified to argue with my version of events. As they loaded him into the ambulance, his eyes, wide with a new and profound fear, met mine. I leaned in close. "If you ever come near my house, my wife, or my life again," I whispered, "you won't be leaving in one piece. Do you understand me?" His fear was the only answer I needed. When Mary came home that night, the shattered lamp and the broken picture frame were gone. The house was clean, quiet. The chessboard had been reset, and the next move was mine. The night Andrew left my house on a stretcher for the second and final time, the silence he left behind was profound. I sat in the living room, a glass of whiskey in my hand, and stared at the empty space on the wall where our wedding photo used to hang. It lay on the floor, the glass shattered, a perfect, tragic metaphor for our marriage. Mary came home late, as I knew she would. Her heels clicked on the hardwood, a sound that now set my teeth on edge. I didn't move. I just sat there, in the dim light, waiting. She walked into the living room and froze, her eyes immediately drawn to the broken frame. "What happened?" she asked, her voice a careful, cautious thing. I looked up at her, my expression unreadable. "Nothing you need to concern yourself with," I said, my voice flat. Her brow furrowed. "Michael, if something is wrong, just tell me." A bitter, humorless laugh escaped my lips. The sheer, breathtaking hypocrisy of her concern was almost comical. "Something is wrong, Mary," I said, setting my glass down. The question is, do you even care? She hesitated, and in that hesitation, I saw the truth. She didn't care about me. She cared about the disruption to her carefully constructed double life. Michael, what's going on? She pressed. I could ask you the same thing. I replied, my voice now edged with steel. Where were you tonight, Mary? Where were you last week? Her face paled. She took a step back. Michael, I don't. I interrupted, holding up a hand. Don't lie to me. Not anymore. The room seemed to shrink, the air thick with the weight of unspoken truths. I finally stood, the quiet, passive husband disappearing, replaced by someone she didn't recognize. I know about Andrew. The name was a grenade. The explosion was silent but devastating. Her hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with a panicked, cornered look. Michael, save it. I cut her off. I've known for weeks. The receipts, the texts, the meetings at the hotel. I even had the pleasure of his company. Twice. He had the nerve to walk into my house and tell me I had lost you. She staggered back as if I had physically struck her. You knew? I knew. I said, my arms crossed. And I waited. I waited to see if you would have the decency, the courage, to tell me the truth yourself. But you didn't. You just kept lying, kept sneaking around, as if I were a fool. The tears came then, hot and fast. She reached for me, a desperate, reflexive gesture. Michael, I'm so sorry. Don't apologize, I said, my voice as cold and hard as the floor beneath us. Not unless you mean it. And even then, it doesn't change a thing. She crumpled onto the couch, her body racked with sobs. A part of me, a ghost of the man who had loved her, felt a flicker of pity. But it was quickly extinguished by the cold, hard reality of her betrayal. This was her creation. I've already spoken to a lawyer, I said, the words of final, clean severance. We'll discuss the terms of the divorce in the morning. Her head snapped up, her tear-streaked face a mask of disbelief and panic. Michael, no, please. I made a mistake, but we can fix this. There is no we anymore, I said, my voice absolute. You made your choice, Mary. Now, I'm making mine. Her pleas devolved into a desperate, incoherent torrent of apologies and promises, but I was no longer listening. I had made up my mind. This wasn't just about revenge against Andrew. It was about reclaiming my life, my dignity, and my future. As I walked out of the room, leaving her to drown in the wreckage of her own making, I felt a strange, clean sense of liberation. The storm had finally broken, and in the aftermath, I could finally see the horizon. It was a long, difficult road ahead, but for the first time in months, it was a road I would be walking alone and on my own terms. I underestimated the tenacity of a cornered narcissist. I thought the second stretcher ride would have been a sufficiently clear message for Andrew. I was wrong. His physical defeat only drove his campaign underground, into the realm of whispers and shadows where he was most comfortable. The rumors started subtly. A concerned colleague asking if I was doing okay, mentioning they'd heard I was going through a tough time. A supplier making a vague comment about my personal issues. Andrew, unable to face me directly, was attempting to poison the well, to erode my reputation, the one thing, besides my home, that I had built with my own hands. Then came the anonymous email, sent to my work address. I know what you did. Attached was a grainy, poorly lit photo, clearly taken on a cell phone. It was me, standing over Andrew as he lay on my living room floor. It was a picture of a victor and a vanquished, but out of context, it could be spun as a picture of an aggressor and a victim. I could have panicked. I could have responded, denied, engaged. But that was his game. He wanted to draw me into a public, messy conflict where the truth would be lost in the noise. I turned to Greg, my lawyer. Classic move, Greg said, his voice a calm, reassuring presence over the phone. He's trying to create a narrative where he's the victim. Don't take the bait. Let him think he's winning while we build the gallows. And so we did. Greg advised me to document everything. Every whispered rumor, every strange email. I even hired the same PI who had tracked Mary to do a deep dive into Andrew's past. What we found was a treasure trove of malfeasance. Unpaid debts to former business partners. An ex-girlfriend who had filed a restraining order, citing a pattern of harassment and stalking. A failed tech startup that had left a string of furious investors in its wake. Andrew wasn't just a charming adulterer. He was a professional sociopath. Armed with this dossier, I waited. He made his next move, as I knew he would, in the parking lot of my office. He was leaning against my car, a picture of casual intimidation, the smirk back on his face. "Michael," he said, "we need to talk. You have a remarkable talent for showing up where you're not wanted, Andrew." I replied, my voice flat. He chuckled. "You don't get it, do you? This isn't over. Mary's with me, and no amount of your caveman posturing is going to change that." I took a slow step closer, my voice dropping to a low, dangerous tone. "You think this is about Mary? You think I give a damn who she's with? You made this personal, Andrew. You came into my home. You tried to ruin my business. That was your mistake." His smirk faltered. "What are you going to do? Hit me again? You don't scare me." "No," I said, stopping just a foot from him. "I don't need to scare you. I just need to destroy you." I pulled out my phone, opened a file, and held it up for him to see. It was a list of names. The ex-girlfriend, the burned investors, the former partners. I wonder how they'd react to a call from a reporter asking about their history with you. The color drained from his face. "Where did you get that?" "It doesn't matter what I have," I said, my voice cold. "It matters what I can do with it. You've spent your life leaving a trail of wreckage, Andrew. Did you really think no one would ever come back to collect?" He took a step back, his bravado completely shattered. He muttered something under his breath and walked away, his retreat hurried and undignified. The game was over. He knew it. I got home that night to find Mary waiting for me, her eyes red from crying. She opened her mouth to speak, another apology, another plea. I held up a hand. "Not now, Mary," I said, walking past her. The house was still a battlefield, but the primary war was won. Andrew's chapter was closed. Now, all that was left was to deal with the collaborator. The silence in the house after Andrew's final, pathetic retreat was a different kind of quiet. It was no longer the heavy, charged silence of a brewing storm, but the hollow, echoing silence of an empty battlefield. The war with him was over, but the wreckage of my own life was still all around me. Mary and I were two ghosts haunting the same house, moving through the rooms with a careful, deliberate avoidance of each other. She had retreated into a shell of her own guilt, her movements tentative, her voice a near-constant whisper. I had retreated into a fortress of cold, pragmatic resolve. The divorce was proceeding, and my interactions with her were limited to the sterile, necessary logistics of dismantling a shared life. It was on one of these long, quiet evenings that she finally broke the ceasefire. I was in my study, going over some paperwork, when she appeared in the doorway. She looked smaller than I remembered, as if the weight of her own choices had physically diminished her. "Michael," she began, her voice trembling. "Can we please talk?" I didn't look up immediately. I let her stand there, a supplicant at the gates of a city she had willingly abandoned. Finally, I set down my pen and leaned back in my chair. "Go ahead." "I'm sorry," she whispered, the words so familiar, so worn out. They had lost all meaning. "For everything. For the lies. For what I did to us." She took a shaky breath. "I know I don't deserve it, but I have to ask, is there any part of you that can forgive me?" "You're right," I interrupted, my voice colder than I intended. "You don't deserve it." Her face crumpled. "Michael, please," she sobbed. "I made a mistake. A terrible, life-ruining mistake. But I love you. I never stopped loving you." I laughed, a bitter, humorless sound. "Love?" I echoed, shaking my head. "You call that love? Lying to my face for months? Sneaking around with a man who then has the audacity to come to my home and declare it his? That's not love, Mary. That's a pathology. I didn't mean to hurt you," she cried, the tears now flowing freely. "I was lost. I was confused. Lost is a convenient excuse for a woman who simply wanted something more exciting," I said, my voice flat. "You weren't lost, Mary. You were just selfish." She crumpled onto the floor then, her body racked with sobs. A part of me, a ghost of the man who had loved her for half his life, felt a flicker of something. Pity, perhaps, but it was quickly extinguished by the cold, hard memory of her betrayal. "I'll do anything to fix this," she pleaded through her tears. "Therapy, counseling, whatever it takes. Please, Michael, don't give up on us." I stood then, unable to remain in the same room with her any longer. "There is no us anymore, Mary," I said, my voice low but firm. "You burned that bridge the moment you let him into our life. The divorce papers will be finalized next week." As I walked up the stairs, her cries followed me, a haunting soundtrack to the end of an era. But the next day, a new, unexpected threat emerged. A man I didn't recognize was outside my office, leaning against a lamppost, watching me. The next day, he was at my coffee shop. He never approached, never spoke, just watched. On the third day, he blocked my path as I left work. He was tall, wiry, with the same arrogant set to his jaw as Andrew. "Michael," he said, his voice a low growl. "We need to talk." It was Caleb, Andrew's younger brother. "You hurt my brother," he said, grabbing my arm. I shook him off. "Your brother is a predator who got what he deserved." Caleb's lips curled into a snarl. "This isn't over. Andrew may have backed down, but I won't." I stepped closer, my voice dropping to a near whisper. "Let me be clear. You are a footnote in a story that is already over. If you try to intimidate me, you will fail. If you try to fight me, you will lose, and you will lose badly. Walk away while you still can." He glared at me, a silent battle of wills in the fading afternoon light. I could see the hesitation in his eyes. He was all bluster, no substance. Finally, he backed down. "This isn't over," he spat, before turning and disappearing into the crowd. I knew it was the last, pathetic gasp of a defeated enemy. The final act of this tragedy, as it turned out, was not a dramatic confrontation, but a quiet, methodical unraveling. Andrew and Caleb, it seemed, had one last, desperate card to play. The whispers they had started in my professional life began to coalesce into a more organized smear campaign. Anonymous letters were sent to my clients. Vague, unsubstantiated rumors about my violent temper and instability were posted on local business forums. It was a pathetic, last-ditch effort to salvage some semblance of victory from the ashes of their defeat. But they had made a critical error. They had mistaken my patience for passivity. While they were busy slinging mud, Greg and I were preparing a response. We had the dossier, the irrefutable evidence of Andrew's past, the unpaid debts, the restraining orders, the litany of burned investors. We had been holding it as an insurance policy. It was time to cash it in. The opportunity presented itself at a local charity gala, an event I was attending for work. I knew Andrew and Caleb would be there. It was their world, a world of surfaces and appearances. They wouldn't be able to resist the chance for a public confrontation. They cornered me near the bar, their faces masks of smug, self-satisfied arrogance. Andrew, with Caleb as his silent, thuggish backup, raised his voice just enough for the surrounding crowd to hear. "Michael," he began, his tone dripping with mock pity. "How does it feel to lose everything? Your wife, your reputation. What's left?" I remained calm, my expression unreadable. "You've always been a man of many words, Andrew," I replied, my voice quiet but carrying. "But you've never understood that actions are what truly matter." I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a small, neatly folded stack of documents. "You might want to take a look at these," I said, handing them to him. He hesitated, then took them, his curiosity overriding his caution. As he flipped through the pages, the bank statements, the court records, the sworn affidavit from his ex-girlfriend, his smug expression dissolved, replaced by a look of sheer, unadulterated panic. What is this?" he stammered. "That, Andrew," I said, my voice still even, "is your life. Your real life. The one you've been running from. I wonder how the good people here would feel if they knew who they were really sharing a drink with." His face was ashen. He was trapped. Caleb tried to step in, a low growl of harassment on his lips. I turned to him, my gaze as cold and sharp as a razor. "You are a shadow, Caleb, and I have no problem extinguishing you. Walk away." For once, he seemed to understand. He grabbed his brother's arm, but Andrew was frozen, paralyzed by the sudden, brutal exposure. I turned to the crowd, many of whom had been listening with rapt attention. "I'm not here to make a scene," I said, my voice calm and firm. "But sometimes, the truth needs to be brought into the light." I spotted a local reporter in the crowd, a man known for his tenacious pursuit of a good story. I handed him a duplicate copy of the documents. "Do what you will with this," I said. Andrew and Caleb fled the gala in disgrace, their power play having spectacularly backfired. The story broke the next day, a comprehensive and damning exposé of Andrew's life of deceit. His reputation was not just tarnished, it was obliterated. He disappeared from our town after that, a ghost who had finally been exorcised. Back at home, Mary was a phantom of a different kind. The divorce was finalized without a fight. She had finally understood the totality of her betrayal, the depth of the abyss she had willingly walked into. She moved out, and our shared life was officially over. In the quiet aftermath, I began to rebuild. My reputation, far from being destroyed, was enhanced. I was seen as a man of integrity who had been targeted by a predator and had fought back. My life moved forward, and in the silence of my now empty home, I found a strange and unexpected peace. The victory was not in Andrew's downfall or in Mary's exile. The victory was in the quiet, steady act of reclaiming myself. It was in the knowledge that I had faced the darkness head-on and had emerged, not unscathed, but stronger, wiser, and finally, completely at peace.